Hi and hello watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show. With me, your friendly neighborhood jeweler, Aloma Joseph, and your friendly neighborhood watchmaker. And he's back in Dresden, Rob Nuds. We today have a very special guest. And this is a recording I've been looking forward to quite some time. He's a doctor. He is a myth, but as well as a legend. And you might have seen his name in the title when you saw the download of this recording or when you started play, but you might not know who he is. He used to be a lawyer. He was responsible for innovations at Manufacture La Jouperet, head of innovation at both Arnold & Son and Angelus. Today, head of innovation and marketing at Celica Watch Company. But why we invited him first and foremost is because he's the founder of Albishorn. I'm talking about Dr. Sébastien Chaulmontet. Welcome, Sébastien.
Oh, thanks so much for this wonderful introduction. I'm glad to be on the show.
We're very happy to have you here because you, when you hit the scene with Albishorn, blew my mind. I have been always fascinated ever since I'm a kid due to my dad about military watches, mil-spec watches, watches for pilots, field watches, trench watches, everything that has to do with military. Now, I always owned Dirty Dozen watches, Type 20 watches, field watches, and I always wondered why nobody pushed further if we talk about Type 20, Type 21, Type 22. Why did people stop? Why don't we see cool legendary watches like the Dirty Dozen REF watches? So when I discovered Albishorn, and for our dear viewers that, or listeners, that have not heard about the brand, check out albishorn-watches.ch, albishorn-watches.ch. Because if I summarize what you do and I had to wrap my head around it, you guys imagine mil-spec watches or vintage watches that have never been, and you beautifully described it as the missing link. Sébastien, I'll shut up. First and foremost question, why are you that crazy to create this brand?
I think it needs a bit of craziness indeed. It's a wonderful introduction. You said a lot of very true things about the watch itself. Yeah, the ID cam actually because I'm a collector myself, and I really wanted to do watches I could not find on the Sunday flea market. And when you start collecting, and as you, I'm a big fan of all these military issued watches, and I have quite a few as well. I always thought, I don't want to do a reproduction of one of these. I really love the Auricos, the Vixa, of course, the Breguet. But I said there should have been a watch before because the German army had one before the French had the Type 20. And I always thought, how could this watch could have looked like? And the main idea was to add stuff and not to reproduce existing watches, because basically as a collector, you always will prefer the original one. And with vintage field watches, they have the advantage of being quite solid, so you can still wear them nowadays. I mean, they're radioactive, most of them, but except of that, you can really wear them on the daily basis. So there's no much sense of making a reproduction because you can basically wear the old ones. They're really, really solid watches. So my idea was to create, imaginary ancestors. And sometimes I will also create successors. So what you said, you could also go up to 23, 24, 25. I will stick to the Type 10, 11, 12, and 13 for the time being. But I found it fun, to add stuff, which shows also that you have a deep love and respect, which have been done. We try to not take ourselves too seriously. So there's also a bit of playfulness involved. But still, we do things on a high technical level. Our watches are cost certified. We try to add always little invention, little patented complications, which to add a bit of fun to the package. But yeah, the idea was really, the main idea was to say, why reproduce, why making re-edition what the rest of the industry is doing all the time and doing very well. Actually, it's very hard to make it any better. But I really wanted to do something I cannot find in the vintage world. So I will never be disappointing having a re-edition of something I could have earned what I would call as a real thing.
That begs the question, is Celita co-founder of this company?
No, not at all. It's really a private project. I'm working part-time at Celita, so I always knew I would do that. I will also present in a couple of months a second brand, which I do with a good friend watchmaker, which is a very, very high-end independent, where we developed an own escapement on an own movement. So I always knew that I would do watches. At Celita, we don't mix up things, in the sense of we are a movement supplier. So it's very important to us to have no links with any kind of watch brands. Including myself. It's also why I do most of the stuff. I do my stuff outside of the company, actually. I use some Celita parts, but I don't use Celita movements as they exist. I modify. I have my own patents on the thing I use. I produce it with my own supplier network. So it's really a second activity of mine.
Let's go back. Where are you from? What made you switch from law to, I guess you're a doctor in engineering, but walk us through your life path, please.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Lausanne. I studied law in Freiburg, Switzerland, because there's also a Freiburg in Germany. Then I moved to Zurich, where I passed my bar exam, and I specialized in corporate law, finance law, and some other stuff. I was also doing a lot of competition law, antitrust. And it's actually how I met the owner of Lajou. So I was obviously already developing watches and patenting stuff at the time. So it's a long, long time ago. We're talking 25 years ago. And so I was already making watches. I had a little brand also during my university time called Ultima Watch, where I produced chronographs, obviously, because I am deeply passionate about chronographs. And so, but I always pursued my law career. Then I started also working at the university teaching, and I did a PhD in law, actually. I should have done an engineering one, but I still stuck to law at the time. And at some point, I got an offer from the owners of Lajou Perret to join and to take care of innovation. They bought all my patents because I had quite some patents at the time already. And then they asked me to take over the innovation. When I arrived there, we had the opportunity to purchase Arnold. So we bought Arnold & Son from Graham. Actually, the British master was the name of the mother company. And later on, as I am a big Angelus collector, and it's probably with GLC, one of my favorite brands, we had the chance to buy that one. So we bought Angelus, and then I was in charge of all of them. To create both movements for Lajou and also creating watches, complete watches for Angelus and for Arnold & Son, which I did for 10 years.
Then we arrive at Albishorn.
So Albishorn obviously is something all of my own, in the sense of both with Arnold and with Angelus, I was shareholder as well, but I was not in the majority shareholder. And so I had also to deal with a lot of, when I did the product, to convince a lot of people, but I had great support because we did crazy things with Arnold. Probably we did a bit over it. I did over 22 calibers. I mean, I left 7 years ago. I think they haven't launched any new caliber since, so they had enough in stock. But it's always happy to see what they're doing with the brands nowadays. But technically wise, we were a bit crazy in how many novelties we launched at the time. And I always knew I wanted to do something by myself. It's why it took me actually 8 years to be where I am now, because I all finance myself. I'm the only owner of Albishorn, and so I do it little by little, step by step. I have big plans in a sense of quite crazy movement, complicated ones, but it needs a bit of funding and need a bit of sales of the existing products before I can start new ones, technically speaking. And what I wanted with Albishorn is to have the freedom to do it as I see it, also to keep it small. At least when I start, I don't need to have a big brand, and I want to do products which are very niche. As you see, we don't do 3 hands, we don't do automatic, where we have an automatic chrono, but most of our watches are hand-wound chronographs. So everybody who would ask me advice how to start a brand, I would say do the opposite. What I am doing with Albishorn, don't try with chronographs because they're expensive by nature. Make a 3-hand, try a nice design, try something more on the case and hands and dial design rather than attacking the movement as I did now with Albishorn. So yeah, I really like the fact that I can do the brand exactly how I envisioned it, and I'm not accountable to anyone except to myself. So that is a nice position to be in, because before, I was working for corporations, and you need to turn a profit quite quickly, and that's not my main goal with Albishorn.
So how's the reception been so far? Have you been out at many events, getting in front of people, getting some direct feedback? What about the response of major blog titles, magazines, and so on? Are people picking up the story and running with it, or is it a real tough slog?
No, it has been amazingly. I never expected to have so much positive feedback, especially from the specialized press, and having such a coverage, because I'm really tiny and I don't do any advertisement or anything. So honestly, I was very positively surprised by the reception. I had a tremendous number of articles. I haven't done any show yet except last year's Geneva Watch Days in September, where I launched the brand. I will probably do it again this year. So I haven't been traveling. I cannot actually, also because of my job at Celita and other stuff I'm doing. I'm involved in other projects as well. But I will start traveling at some point for sure. But now the reception has been crazily positive. I thought it was a bit weird, so I was not expecting so many people adhering to the fact of imaginary, because we are in an industry where everybody claims he has invented almost everything. And I don't know how many people think they invented the chronograph, for instance. One thing for sure, it's not Louis Moinet. But the thing is, in an industry where you claim that you do imaginary, when everybody is very sticking to what they call the history, and I thought it would probably not be that popular, but it was actually. And then I think my design is not everybody's taste as well. It's not extreme, but it's also not trying to please everyone. I try to introduce new chronograph dial layouts, meaning with counters positioned at unusual places. For probably also the human brain needs to adapt and it's not that it's pleasing to everyone. I'm not doing just a classical bicompact chronograph. So I thought honestly it would be much more difficult than it is, and that the reception would be by far not that positive. So no, I have been really positively surprised.
Okay, so tell me this, because that's going to be a controversial statement, that Louis Moinet did not invent the chronograph. Who do you think the top contenders are for the invention of a chronograph? Or do you have one person that you're sure or did it?
Well, basically, the chronograph needed a lot of different steps I can first explain why the Louis Moinet is actually not the inventor of the chronograph. First of all, look at the Compte Tierce, where they already refer to, in his own book, Louis Moinet said that he sold exactly the same at Arnold in London. And Arnold did one. It's lost, but it's documented that it existed. But also the Arnold is not the inventor of the chronograph. And first of all, a chronograph is a combination of a stopwatch and a watch capable of giving the time. That's a big complexity of a chronograph, is having both in one, having a stopwatch and having a watch giving time. So the Moinet doesn't give time. It's a stopwatch, basically. The other very complicated stuff about chronograph is a resetting. It's having a hard cam. That's invented by Vinel, an Austrian fellow living in Paris. So the most important contribution to the invention of chronograph is Vinel, but Vinel cannot be credited because he didn't do a proper chronograph. He's the inventor of the Rattraport and the hard cam, which is probably the most important part of a modern chronograph, and all was put together by Ferréol-Piguet with Nicole. So Nicole and Piguet, Ferréol-Piguet, can be credited as the people who put all the invention necessary together to have a watch showing daytime, being able to be a chronograph, yet you can reset. Because as you know, as a watchmaker, the big problem is the consumption of energy, and having something you can declutch from the main gear train to start a chrono and to reset it. And the moine doesn't do that. And to reset the moine, basically, you have to put a pin and you wait that the hand comes back to zero. And Wienel, inventing the hard cam, had a system with you could be hit by a hammer and come to zero. So I would say the chronograph is a collective invention of by many steps, and the first who put all that together in the modern day, in the modern sense of a chronograph, where Nicole capped. And actually the watchmaker behind it was Ferréol Piguet from the Vallée de Joux.
This took a very interesting spin, and we've found a unicorn, Rob, both lawyer, so IP rights, engineer, and a watch nerd. So I am spitting here out loud. I think we should invite Sébastien back and maybe do a series of history lessons, maybe a series on patenting and IP rights. But that was amazing. Thank you, Sébastien.
Sorry, it was maybe a bit of a long excursion, but it's a topic dear to my heart. And you probably know I wrote a book about the history of chronographs. So I'm not focusing on the invention. I'm on the modern day part of wristwatch chronographs. But obviously, I did some conferences about the history of pocket chronographs as well. So it's a topic which is pretty dear to my heart.
I wanted to ask about something you mentioned during the incredible explanation of exactly what you meant by that. And it's fascinating. That is probably some of the most valuable information that we've had on the Real Time Show for our listeners to understand that no one person can really be credited with the invention of something that kind of came organically out of many different steps forward. You referred to the dial design or layout of your watch as a bicompax. Now, what I love about how you've tied the hands together using colors is that you have a very clear demarcation for the chronograph function with the red hands and very clear for the time with the white.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as I understand it, only the, shall we say, 7 and 8 o'clock subdial that is a 30-minute counter is part of the chronograph. Now, do you say, therefore, that this is a bicompax rather than a compere, for example? Because I believe there's quite some conversation about the definitions and the terminologies of dialing.
Yeah, this terminology actually is stolen from Universal Genève. And what I was saying is I try not to do bicompax or tricompax or how listen, but in the terminology of Geneva Sport, it will be a compure. Because people always think that bicompax meaning is it's two counters, but actually it's three. When Universal Genève talks about the tricompax, they have an additional date and moon. So mine would be a compure, but what I wanted to say is that people are more used to the horizontal 9 and 3 o'clock counter position, and I decided to have mine much lower, and it's where I would say it's not the usual layout people are expecting, and I thought by doing that a few people would be a bit afraid in a sense of they're not used to it, and the traditional vertical layout of counters, like let's play without our counter at 6. Let's just talk about two counters like I do, but positioned at 9 and 3 with a classical layout is probably for most people more pleasing to the eye. Let's put it that way.
I absolutely love this. The chronograph is my favorite complication. So having some variety within the chronographs, within my watch box, is something that I covet greatly. I think I can only think off the top of my head of one other brand that has counters in this layout. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's maybe not exactly the same position, but the Bremont Code Breaker, I think, used to have these slightly lower down.
Yeah, they had, and it's I developed the movement at La Joux for the MVAs.
There we go. I thought that might have been the reason.
Yeah.
And do I refer to a Lange Söhne as well, although it's not a chrono, maybe?
No, you're right. But I mean, the datograph has them, but not as low. I mean, there are a few. Patek has it on the split. The reference just escaped my mind, but they have it on the last split. They really have the counters very low. They have it on the usual chronograph, also just underneath the 3 o'clock, but they're even going lower on the split. You have, of course, the datograph, who was the first to introduce two counters which were not at 3 and 9, but just a little bit lower. And then you have another one who had the counters very low. It's the Ibarat Chrono 4, where they have 4 counters, hour, minute, seconds, and 24-hour indication in a row with 4 counters. It's a module on a database, quite a funny watch, where they have also the counters more or less a bit higher than I do have them. But as low as I do, you are right, the only one I know of is the code breaker from Bremont. I solved it technically different here than on the code breaker because the code breaker was also a GMT. So it's a bit different. But that too, I'm very impressed that you know that watch, Rob. Because it was a limited edition. It's not that it was particularly noticed.
Well, I do have a slight inside track. I was a watchmaker for Bremont for...
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My favorite one, actually. I really loved the layout and the case finish, and there weren't many that passed through my hands or over my bench, but yeah, it stuck in my mind. So I can't claim to be that well researched. I was there up close with it, but yeah, great watch.
So, and the difference, what I did fundamentally on the movement I use at Albishorn is a thinness, which is probably on the top of my list when I started the project, was to say, well, how can I, in a given also price range, get a movement which is as thin or even thinner than the Valjoux 23, which is the absolute reference, or the Valjoux 72 is a bit thicker because it had an hour counter. So I took the 23 as a reference, which is roughly 6 millimeters. And I wanted to be under that, and I managed to be a 5.7 on the Type 10, which allows me to have a case with a real height of 12 millimeters on top of the sapphire, because there's a new fashion. I don't know where it comes from to give height without the crystal, but the crystal is obviously a part of a watch case. So it sounds a bit weird to give a height without. You can say that the perceived height is less because you don't have the crystal is probably doesn't add that much of visual height, but it's still around. So my Type 10 is 12 millimeters. And I still have 100 meters of water resistance and a digital display for the start-stop reset, which is also on top of the movement, and it's included in the 5.7. That took me quite a while to get everything that's in, based on the Valjoux gear train. Of course, I redid the axis. I redid quite a few stuff to be there. But that was also one of the main targets. If you go vintage, you cannot offer a watch which is 15 millimeters high. It doesn't fit on the wrist. It doesn't wear well, and it's not true to the spirit of these years. So I would say starting with a thin movement is probably the only way to go if you want to do something which could taken seriously as something vintage.
That was an amazing sidestep. So we flew very high, and we're going back to the waters, because the first watch you guys launched with Albishorn was with my dear friend William Messina, which took me actually a few minutes to sit down. I enjoyed it and had to wrap my head around what you guys actually have created. So let's talk about your inception piece, please. You did water collection. Second chapter is air collection. I assume the next one is land?
Absolutely. Will be launched tomorrow.
Whoa. So when you hear this episode, it has been launched. So you're free to talk about all 3 collections, dear Sébastien.
I will, yeah. So we started with water. So my idea was quite a simple one. I like regattas, and the first famous for Swiss, it's a very Swiss thing, obviously. It's a Bol d'Or. It's on the Geneva Lake. So probably only Swiss people know about it. But it's quite an ancient race. It started in 1939, and it was won by a quite famous guy from Geneva, obviously quite a wealthy person, who ordered an incredible boat in Sweden. And I was thinking of this guy sitting in Geneva having this extremely expensive boat, like the Formula One for the lake at the time. And I said, okay, he's close to some quite prestigious manufacturers. He probably saw in the newspaper articles about the Lindbergh chronographs and all these chronographs done for aviations, the Weems and all that stuff, and especially all the ones for Lindbergh. And I'm a big fan of Longines at the time. I have a beautiful stereograph sitting on my desk, and I thought, this guy had this perfect boat, wants to win this race, but at the time there was no regatta chronograph for the race. So the regattas existed already as pocket watches, even with the dots. Everybody thinks it's from the 60s, but there are pocket watches from the 19th with around 1900 with exactly that kind of display already. With you have an Nibel dial and you have dots. It's pretty crazy. But there have been no wrist chronograph for regatta. And actually, technically, everything was invented. So waterproofness existed. You had shock resistant, everything basically in the mid-30s. You had the modern days chronograph available, also with some bit of anti-magnetic even at the time. So it was just that there was no market because nobody was, except super rich people, were not doing any regatta. So there was not like a mass demand for sport waterproof chronographs for regattas. But I imagine that guy having this extremely expensive boat going to some Geneva manufacturer and saying, I want the same Lindbergh had for the air, but I want to have that for the lake. Well, and it's how the idea of the Maxigraph was born, was to add a non-existing, I would say, ancient basic regatta chronograph. So we adapted the sector dial kind of look. Also, the hands are quite typical of chronograph from the time. You can find these designs at Patek on very few steel models, but also on the Mido multi-center chronograph has exactly that kind of hands. So we played a lot with the dial inspired by the Sideograph from Longines. And of course, it had to have a regatta countdown. So I also wanted to introduce a bit something different there. So it's a 10-minute, which stops or declutch itself after 10 minutes, because I don't like this chronograph who restart by themselves the countdown, because the countdown happens once. There's no reason to restart it permanently. So it's how it was born. We discussed it a lot with William, obviously, as he's a big fan of this race and everything. And he was very supportive of the idea of Albishorn in general. And he say, I'm more the product guy, and he has much more bigger following, and also marketing wise, he's much more, I would say, connected than I am. So it's how we decided to actually do one model together to start the brand, which might seem a bit unusual, but I'm very happy because it really helped me a lot to have press and to have presence, and it's how the Maxigraph was born.
Congrats on that. Awesome piece. Are you working with the brand in chapters? So you make something, either limited edition or produce the next amount, and then you close that chapter, move on? Or will these models make it to the core collection?
That's a very, very interesting question. Well, by nature, I produce very, very little. So my target is roughly to produce 150 to 200 watches a year for the time being. It's also what I can handle personally. So my idea is I'm not that much into limited edition, but it's a criticism I heard a lot, especially from collectors who wants to have an assurance that I will not produce more than that and that. And I always saw the brand as trying to make classics. So I think the Type 10 might look good, maybe with some tweaks, but still look good in 10 years. It's not that we don't see any possible evolution, but my aim would be to make classics. So to not limit it artificially something. Well, they're limited by nature, but not. There's no need to. But my idea is I would probably limit it then because it would make some people happy. But I also don't want to just come with exactly the same, just changing one color of any hand and saying, look, it's limited. But the first series had a green hand. And now you can upload the red, and the next 100 will be a blue, and you all think that you have something limited, but at the end of the day, I made 1,000 out of them. So I have to find a right line in, if I do limit it, that it's a true limitation in the sense of you don't see something which pretty much looks the same afterwards. But to come back to it, no, I don't want to close chapters. Maybe the Maxigraph, as it's a collaboration, might be closed, but this is more in the hand of William. Because it's basically it's his model, even if we designed it, but it's actually based also we worked really together on that one. So I consider it more being his baby. But to talk about the Type 10, I hope to keep it alive for quite some years, even if my aim is to produce roughly maybe 30 a year. But to keep it alive, there will be different dies coming out as well, and there might be a Type 11 in a few years. But yeah, so the idea is to create something more classics and to give them time to establish. I see it most people never heard of Albishorn. I would think that in the next 10 years, most people will never have heard of it. So it's also a bit sad somehow if someone discovers the brand in 5 years and still want the Type 10, and I tell them, oh, I had a time frame of 24 hours to order it. I mean, it's how the industry works now. It's also how the online sales works. Basically, you have to push people to pay and buy immediately, and to push some pressure, because otherwise the thing is gone. I hope I can manage it a bit differently, because I produce by batches of 25 watches. So, it's not like, so I hope to keep it in the catalog if it sells, or continue selling, because for the time being had been selling quite well. So my idea is to create some classics, hopefully. But it's not me to decide. It's the collectors, the buyers, who decide if your watch is a classic or not. But I will not artificially stop producing it. What I will do now is probably introduce certain dials which are clearly limited, and because it's really something I was asked for, but it's not natural. It's something I would be naturally drawn to limit stuff, especially when it's artificial somehow.
It's very strange. What you created is a platform that obviously looks like it's been around for decades and decades and decades. And so if somebody did encounter the brand in 5 years' time, when it's a little bit more established as a brand that has existed for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, but it would seem to them almost like, I don't know, you've created a strange sort of middle ground where it's a heritage watch that isn't a heritage watch, but eventually it will have its own heritage, and then people will want to buy into the brand. And I think you've created such a beautiful platform with the Type 10, especially when it comes to like colors that you can play with or surface finishes. It must have been difficult to decide what surface finishes and what color schemes to go for in the initial release, because green, I would imagine, was not very common back in the past, but nowadays people love a green dial. There's so much scope. Do you have ideas of exactly what colors or what surface finishes you might like to apply to the dial to provide that more modern diversity?
Yeah, it's a long discussion we had also with Fabien, with whom I designed the watches, and we had a lot of back and forth. I would say the first Type 10 were much more vintage, with classical flat dials. We tried different kind of bezels. We tried quite a lot of stuff. And then we finally settled for something, I agree with you, which couldn't have existed like that really at the time, because it's kind of texturing and it's something more contemporary. Yeah, the green was, we have other colors to come, not many other colors, but we will bring 2 other colors, and then for the time being, we will call it a day with the Type 10. Yeah, we still try to be contemporary fresh. Actually, the green is not that, because it's not that we are the analyzer saying, yeah, green is in fashion, or Patek had the green chrono. And it's honestly, we went into military colors, and then we found it too military somehow. Because the tone of green we have is not a military green actually, and so we moved to more British green somehow. And honestly, we ended up by many trials, and at some point we tried to free ourselves to do a reproduction of something old, because the first one were really that. So it was almost faking a die from the 30s, except that they were not radioactive. But then we ended up on saying, no, let's use stamping, which we have now for dials, which they hadn't at the time. Let's add some depth to it. The green actually is also fumé, which is also not, you can have dyes fumé, but from the 30s, it's not natural. It's an aging process. So no, you're absolutely right. I would say the black version with the white hands and the steel crown is the most fitting in the sense of historically correctness. So green is a bit of a modern take, I would say. We will come end of the year with a model we call the Officer, which is also period correct, I would say, with a bit of tweaks on the hands. But the main idea of an Officer, as you know, when you look at all the Lemanias and all that, they had lighter dials because Officer were not as much as risk getting a bullet. So they could have bright watches compared to the poor guys in the mud who probably didn't want to have something too shiny. And we have one which probably will be the most accurate from the time, maybe next year or even later. But what you said quite rightfully about the platform is, I think someone can see that we have a master plan in the sense of we know what we want to launch. It's not like that we had one watch in mind and then we had to sit down and said, okay, what do we do next and hurry it. I mean, I am wearing the watches I will launch the next 2 to 3 years are existing and I'm testing them and they are. So I think also the platform, what you said, where you for creativity, there's also the concept of the brand, which probably I'm very excited to show more, but it needs time. In the sense of also to people to digest. With Arnold, I really did the mistake also for one of the anniversary. We presented at Baselworld 5 calibers. I mean, if you are not Rolex, Patek, and a huge PR machine, you have no chance to show it to the world. You have no chance to people to understand what you did, what you invested. So also with Albishorn, I have to refrain from showing everything I have because I really need also the product as a marketing tool because people talk about Albishorn only when I launch something. So if I would launch everything now, I would have probably a bit of press, but you would not hear about me for the next 10 years. But I'm very happy if at some point, maybe in 2 or 3 years, people will see the entire picture and understand what we are doing or trying to do. So the next chapter, which I'm proud to introduce, is now the Earth collection.
I think it's fantastic that you have a multi-year plan, many products in the pipeline, and you're absolutely right not to rush the releases in terms of coverage and giving people time to adjust to a new brand's presence and to understand exactly what it is you're doing. But you must also be under no personal pressure to rush these things out, considering how busy you are. You mentioned earlier that you have a concept of another brand, a higher end brand.
Yes.
From my personal perspective, this is a brilliant way to go about satisfying your desires or one's desires to create multiple products at different price points. I think many brands, especially newer brands, make the mistake of trying to lever every idea they have into the same label when it doesn't fit and it doesn't tell the same story. Now, Albishorn is in a very competitive price bracket as it is. Did you feel like, oh, I want to take the gloves off and, utilize all of that incredible experience that you've got with movement, production and design and go for, the very high echelon when it comes to price point? I guess we're talking 5 figures plus for you correct me if I'm wrong, for like a higher, more expansive concept. What do you think about the sense of splitting your ideas and your concepts across multiple brand stories rather than trying to force them all into one? Is that the same thing that you feel as well?
Yeah, for me, first of all, the other one is done with a close friend, with a genius watchmaker, honestly, and I wouldn't use this word lightly. So we really wanted to innovate in escapements, doing a quite crazy chronometer with double barrel something. And also what people will probably love, absolutely not vintage in the sense of very contemporary watchmaking. So also very different aesthetic, much more purist and as you said, the price point will be uncomparably higher than, and we're working actually on the movement for almost 9 years. So, but the thing is running for quite a while, but no, we have to produce it, make all parts, most are done by hand. So it's also a very different approach. With the other brand, we want to do maybe 5 watches a year. So, and the concept is very, very, very different, very modern. The idea we had is to say, let's build an experimental chronometer in a modern day aesthetic without doing a racing machine for the wrist. So it looks like a watch. But it's not trying to mimicking some kind of all the Berthoud or all the Breguet or Arnold. So I did it. I did that kind of style watches for many years. I liked it doing it, but I don't want to do a rose gold plated kind of movement nowadays anymore. I paid that. I did it. But yeah, so no, there's no way I could both do on the same level, and it's also not the same team and not the same. So there would be no way if you want to put everything under one umbrella, even if it would be probably easier for a lot of other perspective from the internet side up to the visuals and everything. But there's no way. I want to go up with Albishorn as well, in the sense of complicated movements, but nothing will ever be over 10K ever. That's the limit I see for the brand. And you couldn't do, if you do direct sell, you can offer crazy stuff for 10K. but that's the absolute limit where I see Albishorn, and I will stick to the vintage aesthetic. Of course, from different periods. No, we started in the end of the 30s. We will go up to mid 70s at some point. So we are going up, and you will also just as a side note see the logo will evolve over the years depending on the periods we are in, because we really play the game of imaginary. We go pretty far in a sense of at some point. Albishorn had the need to revamp the logo. So in the mid 60s, we changed logo at Albishorn. So on the version before will always have the historical logo, of course, because we will bring back watches from the 40s, but all the watches starting mid 60s will have the modern days Albishorn logo. But to come back to your main question, I have too many ideas. I cannot put them all into one brand. And I think it's very, very important when you do also handmade watches, you cannot confuse that with something which is industrially made. And so it's different ideas. And to be very honest, the first project I started much earlier than Albishorn. And at some point I thought I would never see the other one. It was so immensely complicated doing it all in our basement, from the conception to production. It's crazy when you attack, especially when you attack fundamental aspects of a watch, like a new escapement, and you are just two guys in a garage. People cannot imagine what it means if you don't have a factory behind you doing and helping you. So I thought I would never see that thing alive. So and during COVID, the idea came of Albishorn, because I saw all this re-edition, and I was always betting with friends that the type of re-edition will stop at some point, and it has been going on for 20 years. So I was proved wrong. And a friend told me, but why do you always complain about re-edition? I say, because I'm always seeking for the original. And it's how the idea came. And the guy, my friend, told me, but what would you do? I say, but doing all the vintage we wished they would, and they never made. So adding paintings to your favorite painter instead of buying a copy, a printed copy of a famous painting. And it's how actually Albishorn started. But it started also a bit out of the idea that the very complex project might never go to the end. And it's how I end up with having two brands. Well, one is not launched yet, but it will, at some point.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love this idea of creating a false heritage, but openly, like this alternate history almost of how things could have panned out just slightly differently. Years ago, because I'm a big sports fan, I made a series of sweatshirts for my friends that had the Olympic host cities from certain years, but not the ones that had actually won and hosted the games.
Oh, that's crazy cool.
Yeah, I had Toronto Lightning Sticks. That was the most popular one. People were like, what is this? The people assumed that it was like a jersey that someone had produced in anticipation of Toronto winning the games and then it never having happened. And I thought, this is so great. You've done it with watches and created products, which, I think it's just so beautiful to watch it develop and to see like how people perceive it over time. A lot of people have been very frustrated with major brands like, say, let's take Breitling, for example, constantly reissuing stuff from the past, but executed with modern manufacturing techniques and, better materials and more refined printing processes and so on and so forth. I kind of love it because I think there are great designs that never really went out of style that deserve that second wind. But to have something completely new that taps into that desire for this sort of familiar, the fresh and familiar look of Albishorn is just absolutely stunning to me. I think it's a great concept and beautifully well executed and very well communicated, which is absolutely essential to pull it off. But talking about price points, just from a more macro perspective, when you look at the industry now, what do you see as the gaps in the market, as it were? As I said, Albishorn's operating in around the $5,000 mark. That is saturated. It is full of many heritage brands that you have to compete against. Do you think that that's the toughest place to be? And you feel like when you do finally launch the ultra high-end concept, you'll have a little bit of an easier time to create some noise and separation around what you're doing because there's fewer but maybe more active customers? Or do you look even lower and think, there's a opportunity to do something using your experience and your connections that is maybe $500 to $1,500 and really fly with that?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. Yes, the expensive, the high-end, the handmade watches, I'm very close to Raoul Pagès and his brand, and I advise him on some aspects. So I'm pretty involved in what he does, and the demand for handmade and that kind of watches is immense still, even though everything is going down. I would say it's an easier place to be. It's the high end because you do small volumes. You are very dedicated collectors, and if you do a great product, if you're really true to values, if you really do the stuff you say you do by hand, and if you really take 6 months to do a watch which has a lasting value, I think there's still a very good market. I wouldn't say that you had the impression every watchmaker student leaving a school in France becomes an independent watchmaker and wants to become Journe, but except that, which is probably a bit excessive, if you are good at what you do, like Raoul with 30 years of experience, or not exactly, but 25 years of restoring and making crazy watches, and you have this and you have this know-how he has, you have really, I think, a very strong position in nowadays market. In the price point where I am, as you said, is very, very crowded. It's probably the most difficult one. I see it even with my non-existing high-end brand. I have pre-orders of people who haven't seen the product. That's the crazy thing. People wanting to order stuff without having seen it. And you would never, or barely, I don't expect that to be with a 5K watch. Maybe a few had it during COVID times where people were crazy about all these brands, but I think it's a very difficult marketplace, 5K. But that's where you end up if you do quality and you do Swiss made and you do COSC and you do movement modification. It's unfortunately, I would have loved to be more accessible. I hope to be under that. I couldn't. But it's not that I aim to be at 5. I aim to be lower. But the reality of the thing I wanted to use, the quality I wanted to achieve, there were no way going down without doing shortcuts. But then again, it depends what you want. I really wanted to have a watch I want to wear myself. I don't do watches, and I think hopefully someone else will like it because I would never wear it. I wear my watches. I do them primarily because I want to have one myself on my wrist. So when you want to go down in price, that probably says a huge market, obviously. And you see a lot of brands doing a crazy good job. But when you see the people who succeed in this job, these are really people very well connected in distribution, very good at marketing, and it's almost drop shipping. Basically, they never touch the watch they're selling. They are made in some factories, depending where, and these people have a knowledge and a savoir-faire, which I don't. It's basically, to give you an example, I do ship all my watches. I know could write about a PhD about the FedEx problems, but I could not imagine how these guys managed to ship 10,000 watches out of Hong Kong, and everybody is happy and everything goes well. And you need a huge manpower behind it to handle all the after sales issues, all the shipping and the emails and everything. With Albishorn, you really have to, if you are emailing to info@Albishorn, the only person who will ever answer is me because I'm handling it. So my point is, to go down in price, you really need infrastructure. You need from day one huge volumes, and it's a different business, because I would say if you are in the entry price, you are not a watchmaker, you are someone specialist in selling and distribution, which is not a critic by any means. I admire these people, how they handle it and how they manage to produce watches to these prices. So, but it's not something I would say I have no qualification to go in, and I also have no personal interest in doing so. But I'm admiring people who are successful in that price range, and I admire the way they're organized, and as well as I admire somehow Amazon. But personally, I'm not a client of Amazon. But I'm mesmerized by how they manage to do their business and how it's organized. But it's more people coming from logistics, people coming from companies of mass consumer goods, who I would say who are very well performing when they start such kind of brands.
You gave me the perfect segue to talk about retail distribution and sales of watches. You actually answered the majority of my questions. So I wonder, where do you see yourself? You're obviously a philosopher, you think a lot and you execute. Perfect combination. Where do you see yourself as a inventor, entrepreneur, and your watchman? Where will you be in 5, 10, 20 years if you daydream? Since you do that with Albishorn, you daydream. No.
It's very hard to project. I mean, the most important thing for me is that I keep the passion for what I do. That's the most. I think the most important thing is that Albishorn started as a fun project, and I'm fighting that it stays like that. It was born out of joy. I never thought to make it my main activity. That also answers a part of your question in the sense of it's thrilling working at Celita. It might maybe not look from the outside, but we do crazy stuff, even if we're not always allowed to talk about it, because we do a lot of manufacturer movement for other brands, which, well, are confidential, of course, but heading innovation at Celita is very interesting, because I joined at the moment where we were switching from pure generic ETA products 8 years ago to start developing our own calibers, our own technologies, our everything. So to be part of that big team, because Celita is a very, very big ship, was really quite a wonderful years of what we could create. There are quite some few things coming out as Watches and Wonders in big brands, which are, I'm really proud that we managed to do them. So I would not want to miss that part of this highly industrial. But I also like, as I'm working part-time, having my days where I can do my Albishorn or other projects. So honestly, what I like about watchmaking is this diversity of doing mass movement in the morning, thinking a bit of Albishorn during lunchtime, and having dinner with Raoul and thinking if you might produce more than 5 or 6 watches this year and what it would take. And so if you want this diversity of watchmaking, we call it a watch actually, but it's such a different word. That is what Rob said about the different price points. It's at some point, it's not the same business. You're not talking about it. It gives time somehow, but it's probably the only common aspect to these products. Something fully done by hand by one watchmaker, it cannot be compared with something done fully industrial for under 100 francs, probably never touched by a human hand, and something around 5K, which is probably something a bit in between, in a sense it has seen a human being at some point in the production process. And but it's so in 5 years I probably will still be at Celita, I guess. I hope that I will have some recognition in the sense of Albishorn, that I could easily do my 200 watches without worrying too much if I will sell them, and because it's what I need to be sustainable. I hope with Albishorn that I could bring all the movements I want to make in that price bracket, because I honestly have a few funny ideas. I just patented one recently, and I really hope to have it on the list at some point. And and I hope that I will have launched my high-end brand, and that it will be recognized for what it is, and that we will have a little workshop where we can produce that. Because no, we will not continue doing everything ourselves. It's just impossible. I strongly hope that these two little brands will have found their. I have no dreams of making volumes in none of them, actually. Well, 200 is still a volume, but for me, it's more having something sustainable in a way of, even if you have ups and downs in the market, and the watchmaking, as you know better than I, is known for its ups and downs, and I think we are in a quite terrible down as the industry right now. And I've experienced that for many years, because I've been in this industry for over 20 something years. So I think if you, as an independent, it's very interesting if you have a brand where you can say, whatever happens, 200 people in the world will be happy to wear the watch I've developed. And I'm focusing on these. I'm not trying to make just 250 to, when I have a bad year, I have 50 watches I cannot sell. I prefer by far having a good year where I could sell 400s and saying, guys, I'm just fine and happy with my 200s. I don't need this growth. Everybody talks about growth. Everything is about growth. I think the most important thing when you are a privately owned or a one person, so to speak, company, is to find the right size. I think most people in life struggle, or companies, because they are uncomfortable in the size they have. Everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to, and I think when you look at very successful stories like Journe, not that I have anything comparable with Journe, don't get me wrong, but what I admire about his business is that he was very focused on the number of watches he wanted to make. He never said that he wanted to become Patek Philippe, or he never said he would do 10,000 watches a year at some point. And he never did. And I think he did great by limiting to under 1,000 and maybe more expensive watches, but not playing with the numbers. I would rather do 200 rattrapante or foudroyant chronographs than doing 400 of my I would prefer doing more added value, more specific, even more crazy, but obviously more expensive, but rather than doubling the volume.
You triggered two things within me, so maybe final philosophical discussion, but to quickly close the chapter on FP Journe, you're way too modest, because while I've been listening to you the last hour, I've actually thinking a lot about FP Journe, which I've been admiring from day one, and his Latin phrase that he engraves on his dials, which is inveni e feci, is very much so your personal slogan, because it means invented and made. So that's what you do. You execute. You're an inventor and you execute. So please don't be so modest, and please keep on pumping out these crazy ideas that you have. Now, I've been having this idea in my mind because I love tech as well. I've been always working in the tech industry since the early 2000s, even the end of the 90s. While simultaneously loving the mechanical world. I have been studying AI very much so since 2016 even. And I've been racking my brain the last few years about the battle of closed ecosystems versus open source. Mark Zuckerberg goes open source with Llama, their AI, and LLMs, whereas obviously ChatGPT and etc. are closing the systems. The question I have for you on a closing note of this episode, and maybe we'll need a whole episode for the answer, is you've been mentioning patent many times during this interview. Do you think that one day we'll see an open source watchmaking collaborative?
Well, the only person ever offering that, it's because they knew that the system wasn't working. I will not name the brand, but I remember when they said they would not patent, and we all knew they didn't because it was not functioning. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a very interesting point actually you're raising. Is we have an immense. We have an immense number of patents in the watchmaking industry, mechanical one, and it's pretty funny because actually we are a dead technology, right? So it's very fun to have something which have been surpassed by so many other technologies in precision of timekeeping. Not even going into atomic clocks, but just start with quartz watches, would basically just wear a bullet in our heads as mechanical watch fans. So also with my engineers, I like to make jokes from time to time, saying don't invent too much because you will just invent an electronic device. Because basically, we try to improve mechanical watches, but basically we could just switch the technology and having something much better in a way of precision. I mean, timekeeping, not visually and not mechanically, but the reason I mentioned patents, or the reason why I do patents, actually is not really to prevent anyone to do it, because I'm much too small to even try to start to attack people. The problem you have in this industry that people do really, you do have to patent nowadays, because otherwise someone can block you from producing your watches. The problem is if you don't, in a development phase, before you publicly show your movement, if you don't, you can be blocked. I have a very good example actually of something which happened to me. I had developed for Albishorn a phase of the Earth seen from the moon, and you can imagine my shock when I saw this watch. The Moon's watch coming out. I have to buy one because it's a fantastic. And I always, I was always looking at these NASA pictures taking from the moon, seeing the Earth. And then I made some research a few years back from what does it take to make phases of the Earth seen from the moon, which I found it very unnecessary, but very, very romantic. And then you realize that it's not that complicated. It's pretty much a reverse of a moon phase. So it also allows you gear train having something very fun connected to the moon phase, one corrector, something easy to do, but you can present it visually quite beautifully. So we did one. We had the movement ready. I thought it's honestly that simple. I not even sort of patented the thing. And like a few months ago, you had the Swatch coming out with a phase of exactly what I wanted to do. My presentation would have been a bit different, my visual, and they claim they patented it. I haven't found the patent yet, but I'm looking on a weekly base. So basically, my mechanical version of it, which is not a chronograph actually, it was a freehand with other calendar functions. So it was not based on a chronograph. It would have been an Albishorn non-chronograph at some point. I can just throw it away. And I remember when I got the news, and wasn't a good day because all the work I did on that, and I didn't patent it because I thought it was not that revolutionary. And patenting is something quite expensive. Even I write the patents myself, but with all the taxes, and I still use a specialized lawyer to review my thing and to and to bring it to the office. So we have a good deal because I write it, but still it cost me a few thousand Swiss francs if I put everything together. So I cannot afford to make hundreds a year. So when you're a small company, you really patent stuff just to prevent someone because I don't mind Swatch Group making a phase of the Earth, but they will mind if I do one as well mechanically. So for my product is dead, because if you have the Swatch Group against you, probably it's straight to hell. So so to go on to your open source, if you're in an industry which is very aggressively non-open source, and you are a small, let's not even say small, like a tiny inexisting player, what I am, you don't patent because you want to challenge someone. You just patent because you don't want to be challenged by the big ones. And the big ones, believe me, even if you're super small, challenge you on any levels. You don't even think that these people would know that you exist, but believe me, they do. And even if you sell 30 watches, you can get a letter from one of the lawyers because they still find that one of your model name is too close of one of them. So with patents, especially in the technical field, as you cannot just show it to the world, because once it's shown, you cannot patent it anymore. The problem you have is during you have the idea and you make the product, you would, let's say, you take 3 years, that if in the meantime someone produce or patent the same idea, you can throw away all the development. So I had to really scrap my entire phase of the Earth mechanical watch because it's patented, and so I'm dead.
Well, on that slightly terrifying and mortally depressing note, imagining the Swatch Group coming for us in the middle of the night with a black bag and a hammer, let's wrap up the show. Sébastien, it was an incredibly illuminating hour, and as Alon intimated earlier, I would love to have you back on the show because I think there's so many more things that we could discuss, and you have so many irons in so many fires. We need to hear how they're all progressing as time goes on. So thank you for your time.
And thanks for having me. And it was a real pleasure to have the opportunity to explain the thoughts behind the brand. So thanks so much for having me, both of you.
It really was our pleasure. And I'm sure that our listeners are going to enjoy this episode. And I can already imagine that our mailbag will be bursting with new questions for you and about the concepts that you discussed today. So if you do want to get in touch, you can ask us these questions either via our dedicated Instagram handle at therealtime.show, by emailing either Alon, David, or me at alon@david@ or rob@therealtime.show. You can contact Scarlett via her Instagram handle at SCARLINTHESHIRE. That's Scarl in the Shire. Or you can get in touch with us via the contact form at www.therealtime.show. And for any of you listening on your favorite podcast player, there's a new function now, fan mail. You can actually contact us directly through the app. So just look for that link at the top of every episode and drop us a quick text. We'll be back soon with more top quality watch content from the industry's finest. Until then, stay safe and keep on ticking.